know Alonzo put out his hand one day? Don't you know Alonzo lifted up his head and cried?
Good evening and welcome to another episode of What's So Funny, the show that probes the brains, the minds, and the psyches of the people who make the funny. Tonight, Alonzo Bodden. Alonzo Bodden has been on 3 seasons of Last Comic Standing on NBC. I think the first year he came in second. The second year he won it all, $250,000. And then the third year he came back as a judge. You've seen him in lots of other things too. Many, many things, and you'll recognize his voice. It is a deep baritone. I've gone way back with Alonzo, probably more than 10 years. I don't know if he remembers that, but he acts like he does, and I appreciate it. He was kind enough to sit down on a beautiful sunny day in the empty Yuck Yucks Comedy Club on a Saturday afternoon when he was in town headlining. And we talked about, well, of course we talked about basketball because that's where we first really met, mano a mano. So we talked about that, his beloved Clippers and my beloved Grizzlies. And so, you know, you're going to have to get past that. I know not all of you are basketball fans. And then, of course, we talked about jazz. I know you're not the biggest jazz fans. Well, maybe some of you are. But it's still an interesting talk. And we get past those 2 subjects and move on to lots of other things. So, you know, if you really detest jazz and basketball, hang tight, okay? I think you'll appreciate it. Here now is my conversation with Alonzo Bodden. All right, Alonzo Bodden, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we recording? Are we on? Are we live?
Hello? Is this on? Yes. Yes, we are.
Is this thing on?
We are. You are my basketball nemesis from years ago. I told you last night that my basketball highlight was checking you in Montreal, Artist versus Industry. My son wasn't born, so it was before 2004. Do you know what year that would have been?
No, it might have been, let's see, 99 or, yeah, it's probably 99. I think I was there. I did New Faces in 97, did my first gala in 99, and then I don't know when I went back after that. It's pretty much every 2 years, so I was probably there in 01 or 02, something like that.
And
but then they've stopped. They don't do basketball anymore.
What do they do?
Hockey.
Ugh.
Yeah, they play roller hockey. They haven't had basketball in a long time. I think somebody got hurt one year, and that's when they stopped doing basketball and switched over to
they can't get hurt in hockey or any sport. You can get hurt. But also, I guess because as we know, basketball is kind of a skill sport, and if you don't play it at all or have never played it, you're pretty pathetic.
Yeah, some players were really good.
Some were, yeah.
Steve Sharippa, the first year I played, was surprisingly good. Surprisingly good for a big guy, for a big, heavy guy. Ben, I don't know why I'm blanking on Ben's last name, from Cash Cab. But anyway, he had played college ball. He was probably the best guy I've ever seen in that game because he had played Division I college ball. But there have been a few others that were really good. It was fun.
It was fun, and so you were pushing me around. I wasn't pushing you around.
Yeah, I was younger then.
We were checking each other, and I got a couple baskets.
Yeah.
And I remember being out of position, and you being down low, doing the one bounce shack inside, up, and slamming it on me.
Yeah.
And that was my highlight.
And that's pretty low for a highlight. Me dunking on you, if that's your highlight, I can't say that was, you should come up with a better story. Just nobody knows. That was before the age of video.
My wife was videotaping.
Oh, she did get it?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I don't know where it is, but it's out there somewhere. But in the meantime, I could say that I remember dunking on you.
Yeah, change the story, make it better.
So we go back a ways, and you go, like, I've read that your big break was in Canada.
Yeah, New Faces was my first big break in comedy. I mean, most people think it's Last Comic, but Last Comic was, I look at that as my introduction to America, basically. But New Faces was when I gave up all the day jobs and the hustle and this and that and became a full-time comic. And New Faces was also where the comics who I really looked up to and still do to this day, guys like Dom Herrera, and Dom was the main one because he was the host when I did New Faces, but I became a comic in their eyes. And that was a big difference, you know, because I had worked as a doorman at the Laugh Factory and this or that. I'd been around, but when I did New Faces, then I became a comic. That felt good.
Yeah. So yeah, it was respect from your peers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's no funnier host than Dom Herrera.
Dom was fantastic. He used to do New Faces every year, and now they rotate hosts. I've hosted it twice. I liked it. I enjoyed doing it because I could tell them about how much better it was when I did it. When I did New Faces, they were still making deals, and you left Montreal with a big fat check. Now you're lucky to get a free lunch.
Yeah. Did you leave with a big fat check?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
Yeah.
So who does that come from?
Mine was from a studio called Greenblatt Janellari, and I don't know where David Janellari is right now, but Greenblatt went on to run Showtime and then run NBC for a while.
So this was like a holding check.
Yeah, it's a holding deal. And, you know, Chris Titus, who had gotten his, I think, the year or 2 years before me, he was the guy who explained it to me. He was like, look, man, this is your learning deal. He said, they're going to give you a lot of money. You're probably not going to get a show, but you're going to have a lot of meetings and you're going to learn how everything works. And then hopefully you do another one in a couple of years, and that one might lead to a show, because that's what had happened with him. And it didn't happen with me as far as getting a show, but he was definitely right about the learning process.
He was, eh? And he was in that basketball game too.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that. I would always imagine, not having been through it myself, but just that going up and starting to get noticed must be the most exciting time in someone's career, no matter how much success you get later on. Is because it's all new and there's world of opportunity opening up.
Well, it was great for a couple of reasons. For one thing, I was fortunate that I didn't know enough to be scared. You know, so to me, like when I got the call, because back then they did it differently. You did your showcase for New Faces. They did them like in February and March, and nobody really knew who was going. They didn't tell you if you made it or not until the end of June, which was right before the festival. And then they brought us up, and it wasn't secret, but it was kind of secret. Like they put us in a different hotel than the rest of the festival. We got there the day before our show. And then we went up, and basically that's when people saw you. So for me, like I knew my goal was to get a deal, but it was also just a matter of doing a set. It was a matter of doing, I think we did like 7 minutes or something like that. And I had just started, I was mainly a middle, but I had started closing a few B rooms. So I had some material. So to me, doing 7 minutes was easy. You know, now it like New Faces. Now there are so many different New Faces shows. There's New Faces, then there's unsigned New Faces. Because when I did it, there were a lot of people who weren't signed. Now everyone who goes to New Faces is with some agency, and then they have New Faces of sketch and so on. So when I went up, I was in a hip pocket deal, meaning I hadn't signed anything, but I was sort of represented by APA. And I had a manager, Rick Rogers, and I had this joke in my set. Like I remember the exact moment, which I guess a lot of people don't, but for me it was a moment when everything changed. I did this joke. I said, I don't like hockey. And the crowd booed, you know, because obviously we're in Canada, right? And I was like, shut up, I don't like hockey, because the only thing black is the puck. And every time I look, they're hitting it with a stick. I said, now golf, on the other hand, right? So
I remember that joke.
The joke killed.
Yeah.
Well, what happened, Rick came downstairs, and the way New Faces was set up, the audience was downstairs and the industry was upstairs in sort of a horseshoe-shaped balcony. And he said, when you told the crowd to shut up, everyone in the industry looked down and said, who is that? because he said, because the idea of telling the crowd to shut up during your New Faces showcase was unheard of. Well, to me, as a comic, it was just instinct. It was just, what you do. Tell them to shut up. They're booing. You tell them to shut up, and then you make them laugh. So had I known more, I might have been afraid, or I might have not done that, and it would have been different. And that's a difference, in my opinion, between comics and actors, because a lot of agencies send actors to New Faces with the hope that they'll get a sitcom. They teach them to do 5 minutes of comedy.
They give them the material?
Yeah, and they send them up. But they don't have comic instincts, and that was the moment for me. The other time I saw it, and this is a guy who's gone on to become a mega star, which we always knew because he was so funny and so natural, but Gabriel Iglesias, Fluffy.
Yeah.
When Fluffy did New Faces, now this is kind of hard if you've never seen it, but to those who've been to Just for Laughs or seen it, the Bonhomme, the fat little green elf character that's like the mascot for the festival.
Yeah. Bonhomme de Neige or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So they projected that on the stage, this round, fat kind of elf thing.
Yeah.
And Gabe walked on stage, and he looked at it, and he looked at the audience, and he looked at it, and he stood in the same pose because he's a round, fat guy.
Right.
And his shadow covered it perfectly, and the crowd fell out laughing. So he got an applause break before he said a word. And it's like, that's a comic, because he saw what was funny, and he just did it. And I always thought that's the difference between comics and actors, that instinct to, like, you have your script in your mind, you know what you want to do, but in the moment, something's funnier, and you just take the chance and you kill.
Yeah, or the difference between good comics and maybe more inexperienced comics.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
Or just confidence. I don't know.
Confidence, that's it. I mean, you have a presence on stage. You could tell a crowd to shut up if they can sense that you don't hate them. And we sense that with you. You come up here, and I saw you last night, and you're talking about Canada, and whatever it is, you can say something to a crowd. We get that you don't hate us, and you just have this confidence, this presence on stage.
Yeah, that's, I've always said that crowds are it's like a dog. They say a dog can sense fear or anger or whatever emotion you have. The crowd is the same way, and that's why when you come up to delicate topics like racism or misogyny or things like that, the crowd knows if you're joking or if you mean it, and the energy's completely different, and they can tell. They can tell. So when I come up here, when I make fun of Canada, it's because I love Canada, and the crowd knows it. They know I love it. I always have a good time. I've worked coast to coast of this country numerous times, and as I said, I've been up and down the prairies, so I paid my dues.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about, and a lot of American comics come here, and they'll say, "Oh, do you have Walmart here? Do you have this here?" And I'm always thinking, look, do
you have heat in the igloos?
If we don't have it, we can still get the joke,
right?
Yeah,
Canadians are. I mean, if you compare the two, Canadians will get jokes about the U.S. The U.S. will not get jokes about Canada.
That's understandable,
The
I
U.S.
guess.
does not know. Like, Rob Ford is about the only Canadian that you can make fun of that Americans get. But that's because our culture is our biggest export. You can go anywhere and make fun of the United States, and people know what you're talking about.
Right. There would be a few, but not enough in an audience to.
Yeah, there can be a few references that they don't. I'm always surprised at how well they do get the references. But they meaning Canadian audiences, get the references about the United States. But you guys are pretty much up on what we're dealing with.
Well, I think the world knows about the United States.
Yeah, they've heard of it. They've heard of it. It's done.
We've heard
done
of it.
Well, it's got a good publicist. And,
we watch the TV shows, the movies.
You watch the American TV shows that are actually filmed in Canada.
That's right.
So,
so that's good. I mean, you've played Canada a lot. Your first big break was here. You know it, and you come out and last night, I don't know, I didn't have a stopwatch, but first 10 minutes maybe on Canada.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
and 10. The crowd was just going crazy.
Yeah,
like you crushed it.
You know, every time I come back here, I remember things about Canada. So it's like the first show I may not do as much about Canada, but then as I'm here a couple of days, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this and I remember that, and then it comes up. Then it comes up more.
Well, you had a row of teachers in the front row, and you knew all about the strike. Now you've been in town one day.
I always read the news when I get to a new place.
For comedy purposes, or just because you have a curiosity?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. I have a curiosity and comedy purposes, but it's fun because sometimes there's something to talk about that they may not expect you to know about, or everyone else thinking about it. So, you know, the teacher strike, yeah, I did a little bit about that. And I know teachers. My sister's a principal, and I know teachers in the States, so I kind of know a little bit about that topic.
Right. Except for you didn't know substitute is now called teacher on call.
No, it's still called a substitute. That was just her thing. I'm a teacher on call.
No, that is a thing.
You're a substitute teacher.
That is a thing. Yeah. But you made a great point with her, and it's funny being a teacher, not realizing it's semantics.
That's all it is.
And if you substitute for another person, it doesn't demean you. It just means that you're not the regular one.
My dad was a garbage man, and if I call him a sanitation engineer, he'd look at me and say, yeah, that's what I do when I'm not hauling garbage. You know, it's your job. It's your job, right? I could be a humorist if I wanted.
Well, you are that too.
Yes, I want to be a humorist. They're like, look, you're a comic. Get over it.
You know, when you said you came out and you said I hate hockey to the Canadian crowd. One of the maybe the best debate I ever saw in the debaters, and I never got to hear it on the radio. I would have been interested to hearing it because what you did with Sean Cullen, debating the Olympics, winter versus summer, was fantastic, and probably was half an hour in real time. But they would have had to have edited that down.
That was a lot of fun. I still think I won that debate.
So do I.
I mean,
I voted for you.
You talk about a home crowd. Sean Cullen in Vancouver during the Winter Olympics, and I had to take him on. But that was actually a lot of fun. And from what I understand, it was nominated for one of the comedy awards here, or it was either a comedy award or a Gemini. It was nominated for one or the other, that episode, which was very cool. It would have been great to win. Mm-hmm. But it was fun. And, you know, and I still say, with all due respect to Canada and hockey and curling, women's beach volleyball in Rio de Janeiro wins.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what else is going on.
Doesn't matter what else you got. Women's beach volleyball in Rio de Janeiro wins.
Yeah, we have that to look forward to. The reason I am a summer guy, as you are probably, is you got the basketball. Even though it's a winter sport, it's in the Summer Olympics.
Well, the Summer Olympics have a lot more sports that people recognize.
Yeah.
You know, you have basketball, you have track and field, you have like weightlifting, gymnastics, which is always fun, women's gymnastics, the joy of pedophiles worldwide. But you recognize that. Yeah, whereas in the Winter Olympics, you have the skiing that we recognize and the snowboarding because they got to smoke weed somewhere. Imagine if they tested for marijuana, there'd be no snowboarding medals, none. But then you had curling, which the world fell in love with because we had no idea what you guys were doing, and it just looked fascinating. But then you have all those weird sports with, you know, like the skiing and the shooting and, you know, how many different, like, figure skating, and the judges, you know, there are corrupt judges in figure skating. It's like, even if there were honest judges, we wouldn't know how you're scoring that. You know, so.
Yeah, it looks wonderful.
Yeah.
Why is this one better than that one? Unless they fell.
When they fall, or sometimes, you know, you get the guy who does the extra turn, right? One guy does 3 spins in the air, then another guy does 4, and you listen to the announcer, and it's the most revolutionary thing since running water, and you're like, maybe not so much.
No pun intended, revolutionary. But also, how do they count that? They're going so fast. I can't tell how many times they're going around.
Yeah, it's a lot of sequence. It's very interesting, the last Winter Olympics in Russia, how Putin has this whole anti-gay thing, and yet Russia's most famous athlete is a male figure skater.
Just saying.
Exactly.
Last night you were talking about the Clippers and you go to Clippers games.
Yes.
And when the Grizzlies were in Vancouver, I went to all the Grizzlies games. And I'm wondering, between the two of us, who has seen more terrible basketball?
Oh, well, you probably did because you probably went to more games in a shorter period of time.
Right, 5 years.
Yeah, whereas I've gone to bad games since the 80s. My favorite Clipper games and the funniest Clipper games were when the Raiders played in L.A., the Sports Arena and the Coliseum were in the same complex. The Coliseum being where the Raiders played and the Sports Arena where the Clippers played. And if you had a Raider ticket stub, you could go to a Clipper game for $5. They were like, "You already parked. You're here. Why not?"
Sure.
So, but it was, those were bad teams and bad times. I mean, it was out of an 82 game season, they'd win between 10 and 20 games a year. That was it. And it was, and it wasn't like it's going to be better next year. They had probably Elgin Baylor was probably the worst general manager in the history of sports as far as who he picked and who he passed over. And passed over Charles Barkley, picked Benoit Benjamin, the fat version of Patrick Ewing. My favorite pick,
and we shared Benoit Benjamin because we got him from the Clippers.
My favorite pick of all time for Elgin Baylor, he picked a guy named Jeff Lebo out of North Carolina. Jeff Lebo's the only player to ever come out of North Carolina and not be any good.
Yeah, never even heard of him.
Exactly. I mean, this is a school that produced James Worthy, Michael Jordan, Vince Carter. The list goes on and on. Rasheed Wallace. Everyone who comes out of North Carolina's face, it's a basketball factory. They picked Jeff Lebo, the guy who can't play. That's almost like you had to try. Like, who do you have that's really not going to be any good?
So you think he was just looking down, going at the schools, going, "Oh, here's a guy from North Carolina. He must be good."
Well, you would think. No, I don't know what he was doing. He picked Bo Kimball. There was another one.
That's too bad.
Bo Kimball had 3 good games in college after his friend Hank Gathers died. 3 good games. Like, that'll be our first pick. Yeah.
I don't want to turn off all our listeners with our basketball talk. So let's talk about jazz. Oh, that's another way of turning off. You play these cruises. You play smooth jazz, and you're out there sort of as an MC. Is that right?
No. I'm out there as a comic. No, I do, but I don't. I'll host things now and then, but mainly what I do 2 comedy shows in the course of the week. And then I'll joke around like doing other things, like the bingo game. I host that and make it funny and stuff. But, smooth jazz is a horrible name for the type of music because smooth jazz makes everybody think of elevator music and Kenny G.
Yeah.
And what it is, this should be called, they prefer to contemporary jazz. It's just more modern artists who do primarily instrumental music. But what I love about it is the creativity. That's what jazz and comedy have in common. There is a creativity in the moment, a spontaneity that you don't have in any other form of music. And these guys are some of the greatest musicians in the world, and they come on stage. And what's great about being on the ship is as long as they're there, they're like, well, as long as I'm here, I'll play with this guy. And these are guys, combinations of artists that you won't usually see elsewhere. So you have, for instance, Marcus Miller, who people may not know the name, but Marcus Miller wrote all of Luther Vandross's music. That was his big money thing. He was Luther Vandross's music director. Marcus Miller played in Miles Davis's band when he was 19. I love doing the cruises because they're not like ordinary cruises. It's not like, a bunch of 80-year-old people sailing out of Florida and so on. It's a much hipper crowd. It's great music, and I'm the biggest fan on the ship. And I have all access. Like I have the ultimate all access pass because I'm the comic.
But on a cruise ship, and I've never been on one, doesn't everybody have all access to all the shows?
No. You get to go to all the shows. But I'm backstage. I'm hanging out with them.
Right.
You know what
I
mean?
Do you ever ask them about the label Smooth Jazz? Do they have an opinion on it?
Oh, they hate it.
They hate it.
They hate it.
Well, they just call it music.
Well, what it is, radio. the way radio works, radio has to categorize everything. So radio has to be, a pop station, an R&B station, a rock station, and a hip hop station, and smooth jazz just became what they called it as a format on radio, so they knew where to play this music. And the songs people recognize is when they take a regular hit song and they do an instrumental version of it. Like those are the smooth jazz quote hits, when they do instrumental versions of pop songs. But there's so much more to the music than that. So they don't particularly like that label, but that's how it gets labeled, because the music industry, just like any other creative industry, is run by business people who have no creativity. So they only know how to make money off of it, so they have to figure out how to categorize it, sell it, and so on.
Yeah, well, jazz, like rock, is subdivided into many different genres.
Yeah.
And I guess the smooth jazz or contemporary jazz does sound more appropriate, because the sense I get, correct me if I'm wrong, has a more produced sound.
In some ways it's more produced, but actually, you know what it was? It was more palatable. It was easier to understand. If you listen to bebop jazz, the first time you hear it, it just sounds like noise. You're like, what? You have to listen to it and kind of learn it to understand, like, wow, this is really great. Like some of the old stuff that they did, Coltrane and Miles Davis, you're like, what the hell is going on there? But then once you get to know it, then you're like, oh, this is great. Well, smooth jazz was easier to listen to, so I guess easy listening was already taken, so they called it smooth.
And what they don't know about these musicians is, they're great studio musicians. They can do all those styles.
Absolutely. And, they do the other styles, like they do that to make money. You
Sure,
know what I mean?
yeah.
The jazz,
George
jazz
Benson
is what
was it?
Right.
Yeah.
Jazz is what they play because they love it. Yeah, George Benson's a great example. Al Jarreau is a great example.
Another
Al
one
Jarreau will sing a pop hit to make some money.
Yeah.
But then when he goes into the jazz studio and just starts scatting, he doesn't even sing a word. He's just making music with his voice, and that's the genius he has.
It's kind of like actors doing big studio projects in order to be able to afford to do some small independent films that are more interesting.
Brad Pitt does that all the time. Brad Pitt's like, all right, let me do a hit movie so I can do 5 weird movies where I don't have to be Brad Pitt, where I can just act.
There was also that sax player from Philadelphia. I forget his name. He had a big hit.
Grover Washington
Jr. Yeah. What was his hit?
Mr. Magic. It was
No,
called
there was
Mr.
another
Magic.
one, wasn't there?
He did a hit album called Wine Light with where he did some songs with Patti LaBelle that were really good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll stop talking about. Do you listen to the other forms of jazz and other forms of music too?
It did take me a while. Like Miles Davis was one that when I first started listening to jazz, it was like I knew I should listen to Miles Davis, and I'd listen and I didn't get it. And then when I got it, it was like, oh, okay. Like it literally, I listened to Miles Davis off and on for years before I got it. And when I got it, it just sounded better.
Huh. Yeah, but you have to make that decision that I'm going to keep listening.
It's like beer. Nobody likes beer the first time they drink it, but you're committed. You're like, I'm going to make this work.
Yeah.
I'm going to like this beer stuff. And then you learn.
Greatest Canadian jazz musician?
I don't know. Who? You tell me.
Oscar Peterson.
Okay.
No?
All right.
No Oscar Peterson?
No, I didn't know he was Canadian.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Huge. He's on Stamps, I think. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so we've done with basketball and jazz, so hopefully we still have some listeners, because, they're not the most popular up here, either of those. Well, jazz anywhere.
In Europe it is. In Europe and
but
Japan.
I know I lived in Japan, and people say it's popular, but that's only in comparison to North America.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But not through the whole population.
Nothing's like pop music. But, you could say the same thing in comedy, right? The most famous and the biggest name comedians are not necessarily the funniest guys. The guys who have the hit TV shows, or women who have the hit TV shows, weren't necessarily the funniest comic in the club at the time they got the show, So it's always that combination of right place, right time. Sometimes it's luck. Not to say that they're not good,
right?
But it may not be the best.
Yeah,
You know.
Totally. That's across entertainment, except for when we get into the pop culture world. And you said something last night that resonated with me. We're about the same age. You said about Miley Cyrus, I don't even know why I know her.
Right.
And it is so true. Like, if she walked in here right now, I would think that she worked with Yuck Yucks. I would think, hi, we're just doing a show here. I wouldn't know her. I mean, I know the name. I've seen her, but I don't have a good picture in my mind of what she looks like.
Right, but that's what pop culture is. It's an incredible saturation to where you don't even know what the person does from a musical. Music is probably the biggest one that does it. From a musical standpoint, you don't know the music that Miley Cyrus makes. You don't know the music that Justin Bieber does. You don't know. You may not even know really, like Katy Perry is another one where you don't know the songs, but you know the name.
Sure,
because,
Lady Gaga. There's a whole
because
bunch.
it just goes. They pound it into you. They pound it into you, right? Rihanna, Beyonce. It's what's funny with me about them is like when they talk about Beyonce's a diva, it's like Patti LaBelle's a diva, Diana Ross, like you gotta put in 30, 40 years before you're really a diva. You know what I mean?
That.
Like 5 years of hit songs does not make you a diva, although now it does. But I think if you talk to the women, those women who actually sing like that, there is a difference between Katy Perry and Barbra Streisand, even though Katy Perry's no doubt sold more records.
And what is that difference? Talent?
I can't say that Katy Perry's not talented because actually she is.
Yeah.
I don't know how talented Miley Cyrus is or Britney Spears. I know someone who worked with Britney Spears, and they said she can't sing, but she works harder than anybody. Like she, rehearses and does the dance moves and everything. Because Britney Spears, if you step back and look at her, it's the greatest Janet Jackson impression you've ever seen. All you have to do is look at everything Janet Jackson did in the 80s, and that's what Britney Spears was doing in the 90s. The same moves, the same type of videos and stuff like that. But they put in the work. So they get the results. It's just it's the nature of the business. That's what people want. That's what people want.
You hinted how you come into town, or you said how you come into town and you read the newspapers, partly because you're interested, partly for comedy. In your act, you say you want comedy, turn on the news, and it's this turning pop culture into news kind of thing. Is that what your point was?
The point is we have a 24/7 news culture. It's one of the themes I love, that news is not news. And it started really in the 80s with CNN and later Fox News, where you had to fill 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with news. So you had to start making things that really weren't important into important stories. Then the other thing is, and I don't know how it works here in Canada, but in the United States, the news there used to be a thing called the fairness doctrine, where they had to show both sides of an issue if it was a political issue. And if you gave 20 minutes to the left, you had to give 20 minutes to the right. And under Reagan, that changed to they have a way of making things the opposite of what it's called. So they changed it to where the fairness doctrine said, well, it's only fair that we show what we want. That's the fair thing, and that's when you came up with Fox News, which was we're going to be all right-wing all the time because that's what our viewers want.
Fair and balanced.
Yeah, exactly. But what happened was they brought profit into the news. When you brought ratings and profit into the news, then it had to turn into the same thing as every other entertainment show. It had to compete for viewers, and it had to make money to get advertisers. So you have more and more bullshit news because it's sexy to watch. It's fun to watch. So it's not really news. They don't have any in-depth reporting. You look at the NFL scandal, what's going on now. And I shouldn't even say scandal, but what's going on with the NFL and the violence against women and children. All the stories are coming from TMZ. ESPN's not doing the investigating. TMZ gets it, and then ESPN says, "Oh, look at this," and it's because ESPN knew about it all along. They knew that football players were hitting their girlfriends or wives or whatever else, but it wasn't in any way in ESPN's interest to talk about that because that's you're killing the goose that laid the golden egg.
Yeah, and it's because they are also being paid by
Absolutely. So
the
they're
NFL.
not. ESPN would never conduct an investigation into NFL violence if it wasn't for the fact that other news outlets brought it out. And it's ridiculous, but that's how the game works now. So, as Lewis Black, who's one of my heroes in comedy because he's one of the best political comics there is, but he said, look, we comics, we don't want to talk about this stuff, but we have to because no one else is.
Yeah.
The most unbiased reporter in the United States is Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart makes fun of both sides.
He does. Yeah, and he makes fun of the media.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And himself.
Yep. And he keeps it, and he actually is able to do it while being funny.
Yeah.
Which is so important in comedy.
Well, that's
and a lot of comedians miss.
Yeah, and you have to. I remember a producer telling me one time about a friend of mine who's a very good comic. He said, yeah, he got so caught up in the message, he forgot to be funny.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. That's why, because I was like, why don't you book him? He said, that's why, because he forgot it's supposed to be funny.
I know Leno talked about that with, I think, Bill Hicks. Or maybe it was about somebody else. But I did know Leno said things like that.
Yeah, the thing about Bill Hicks, I think Bill Hicks was a great comic, but it's one of those things when he died, he's become worshipped. Like, it's very weird how these comics have deified him. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he would like it. If he had lived, he'd be like, get over me. You know what I mean? Because he saw what was funny about it. And the whole thing with him getting kicked off of Letterman, that was a perfect example when he did the set for Letterman and they told him not to do a joke. I think the joke was about Jesus or religion or something. And he did it and they canceled his set. And everybody was, oh my God, freedom of speech, this or that. And it's like, it's nothing to do with freedom of speech. We have advertisers.
Yeah.
That's the way television works. Television has advertisers. That's who runs television. Right now with the NFL, the reason the NFL is cracking down on the violence is because Anheuser-Busch said, and I love the way they did it because it was very gangster. It was very much like the way Tony Soprano would threaten you, where he wouldn't actually threaten you. He would just say something. And Anheuser-Busch basically, I'm paraphrasing, but they basically said, yeah, we may have to re-examine our relationship with the NFL. And they were like, okay, all of these players, you're out of the league. It was like instantly. They were like, oh, that's the money. That's the $1 billion thing, beer and football. If beer wants to take away beer money, they will change every rule of the game before they allow that to happen. But it was beautiful the way they did it. It was very Soprano-like. I enjoyed that.
You talk about these and other items in the news and sports, whatever, on your podcast, Who's Paying Attention?
Yes.
That's also the name of a DVD, right?
Yes, it was my Showtime special. That's when we came up with the name.
And then you've done, I think, 86 episodes of your podcast.
Yes.
Now, it is, you're a comedian, but you're really there sitting there talking alone, mostly, talking about the issues of the day and ruminating on them and giving your opinions. Now, does this ever, even though it's not a comedic take always, although it could be, just talking about them, does that help you form, like, oh, this might be good in my stand-up set?
But it more, and I'm surprised at how many people listen to my podcast because I don't track it. I don't go online to see how many listeners I have. I just know I get response to it, and I really appreciate the people who do listen. But it's just my stream of consciousness. It's my opinion on various issues, and a lot of it is stuff that I can't go into on the comedy stage because it's not funny or I haven't developed it into being funny. So I can give my real opinion on certain things as opposed to when I'm on stage, then I have to give my funny take on it.
Is it when you're too close to, or you feel too strongly about an issue, it's harder to be funny about it?
The only time it's hard to be funny is if I really don't like something or don't like someone. And the example of that was for 8 years, I could not do a joke about Condoleezza Rice.
8 years.
Yeah, the whole Bush administration.
Wow.
I couldn't because I could never understand Condoleezza Rice. I couldn't understand who she was, and I couldn't make her funny because she was a woman who grew up in the worst of segregation in Alabama in the 50s and 60s and turned into this ultra right-wing black woman, and I just couldn't find it. I couldn't understand, how it happened or why. She's very intelligent. It's not like she was a buffoon or a or a puppet or anything like that. She was very smart, very much her own person. She made these decisions, and I could never figure out how to make that funny. So, and then, the thing with the shooting of black teenagers by the police, I've come up with a couple of jokes about it in relation to when I was a black teenager, but it really is just, it's such a horrible thing. And people, like the people who defend it, it's like you're out of your minds. Like
Defending
when they say
what?
Well, they say it has nothing to do with race and that these kids are danger. And it's like, no, it is absolutely a racial thing that these white cops shoot black teenagers and there's no penalty for it whatsoever. It's just, he was a black teenager, so I shot him. I thought he was like the kid didn't have a gun. Cops have a lot of weapons. Cops have a taser. They have billy clubs. They have the sheer numbers of how many cops versus one guy. If they want to take down somebody without killing them, and they do it all the time when it's a white perpetrator. But
there must be instances where they actually shoot white teenagers too.
A guy Googled it.
He
Googled cop shoot white unarmed teen versus cop shoot black unarmed teen, and it was about cop shoot white unarmed teen. It was like 800 and some odd hits, and cop shoot black unarmed teen was over 700,000.
Wow.
It really doesn't happen. See, that's the thing. That
Statistically,
people say it happened. No, it really doesn't happen.
No, I mean, it's statistically insignificant.
It doesn't happen. The cops don't shoot unarmed white kids.
Ever?
So rarely. It like literally, it's they just don't. They use non-lethal force. It's the way it works. So rarely does it happen. And if a black cop shot a white teenager, he's going up on charges. He's going to jail instantly. It's not going to be like this guy in Ferguson, Missouri, which was just one of many. He still hasn't been charged with a crime. There's been no charges made, and it's gone.
Will there
now.
be, you think?
And the other thing is the story goes away. See, because now everyone's talking about football. Nobody's talking about Ferguson anymore. It's gone. And they will bury it, and this guy will, go away.
He won't still be on the force.
No, they'll move him somewhere else. He'll be a policeman somewhere else or do some other thing.
And
or he just has, now they have like GoFundMe, and they started raising money for him. He's received hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And is there instances of a black cop shooting black kids? Is it like So is it a problem with the cops, or is it with the race?
Statistically, almost non-existent.
Okay.
It has happened, but almost non-existent statistically. It happened in New York, but where it was a bachelor party, and the bachelor party, they were drunk or something like that, and the cops shot a couple of guys, and it was a black cop shooting a black guy. It does happen, but not with the regularity of white cops shooting black kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is weird that football would come along and then just take that out of the news when it is. You would think with 24 hours of news, we can cover all of this instead of just doing the same thing over and over again.
No, it's the same thing over and over. And, and it's not just that, though. There are other stories that go on that I talk about. And some of them are really funny. There's some really funny stuff that happens in the news and really stupid. And I talk about that stuff, too. But on the serious issues, the podcast lets me talk about it without being funny. Just give my opinion.
Yeah. Does it get you in trouble?
Not really. On occasion, there's always going to be people who get mad. The internet allows for opinions of cowards, because when I put something, there's Tony Dungy, who is the former coach of the Indianapolis Colts, who's become a sports announcer. He has a saying, "Put your name on it." When you say something, put your name on it. And Jay Moore, who I love doing his sports show, he has a show on Fox Sports. And he's always quoting that, "Put your name on it." Well, when I put my opinion out there, I'm putting my name on it. If it's on my podcast or my Facebook page or whatever, it's my opinion. But then you have the people that they've come up with the term trolls, who just go on the internet anonymously and spread hatred, whether it be racism, sexism, or stupidity, because the internet's anonymous. They don't have to, they don't have to put their name on it.
It's too bad. I mean, you can't control it.
No, you can't.
But to wade through and find some actual constructive comments is just too time consuming because you have to get through all the other stuff.
There are people who do it for a living, but you just ignore the idiots, because the beautiful thing about society is over time, society gets it right. Society gets it. If you look at the history of the United States, like segregation, which was really fought really hard to maintain, went away because society got it right. If you look at what's going on now with gay rights, 10 years ago in 2004, a big part of George Bush getting reelected was his stance against gay marriage. Now gay marriage is becoming legal in state after state, and the states that ban it, the courts are like, you can't ban this. It's a human right. And the thing about gay marriage that's so funny to me is I've yet to hear anyone say how it affects them.
Right.
It affects the two guys or the two women who got married.
Yeah.
Doesn't affect you. You live three blocks away.
Psychically
affects
them.
So society tends to get
So you're
it right.
an optimist.
No, optimist is not the right word.
Ameliorist.
That I don't know what that means. So
Agathist.
No, I am.
Look those two up. I think those mean that things eventually turn out well. Now, I may be wrong on that. So.
Here's the thing, and this is where I think they get it wrong about conservative versus liberal. And again, I'm talking about the United States, right? Because a conservative Canadian would be considered a ridiculous left-wing liberal if he lived in Texas.
I guess, yeah.
But they say that liberals hate the United States or hate the government. We don't. We know how good we're capable of being, so we hold ourselves to a higher standard because we know the best that the U.S. can do. So I think that's why we get mad, like when you deal with some stupid racist issue or like voter rights being taken away or the stance on immigration, hating anyone who's not American. We know that the United States, America was built by immigrants. America was built by allowing people to come in from other countries. So rather than say the border should be closed, what we should be doing is figuring out how to get these people in. They want to come in, let's figure out how to get them in legally as opposed to closing the border. Mm-hmm. On the gun thing, we know that common sense says you should not be carrying assault weapons into Chipotle for lunch. We know that school shootings could be stopped by fewer guns being sold. So I hold my country to a higher standard than conservatives do.
And you just think that it's a matter of time and people will catch up to
Yeah, I don't
that.
think it'll happen in my lifetime.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, but it is a matter of time. We'll get it right.
So you talked about being a black teenage kid, and did you have experience with cops?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, see, that's the other thing with the police. One of the things, and I don't mean to stay on this topic, but one of the things of the racial aspect of police is, I know what it's like to have a white cop point a gun at me.
Really?
See, you sound shocked.
Yeah.
But no, honestly, all kidding aside, that's normal black experience. There was a great article written by a guy in Texas, and he said it was a white guy with his son, and he's leaving a diner, and he overhears a black guy talking to his son, and his son was asking him, Dad, why did the police shoot this guy, and what do I do when the police? And the black father was explaining to the black son how to not get shot by the police, and the white father was like, I'd never think of having that conversation with my child. Every black parent has that conversation with their son. And that's the difference. And the white guy said, I didn't know what white privilege was until that moment. And then I realized what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. You see, you sound surprised. No black person in the U.S. would be surprised if I said a white cop has pointed a gun at me.
Yeah.
It's normal.
I wonder if black teenagers in Canada have that experience.
To an extent, I think. But, it's very interesting. I was in Toronto a few years ago when there was some gang violence going on in Toronto, and I think they had kind of, from what I got from the article, they kind of imported it from Detroit. It was kind of a copycat thing, and it was a black reporter, and he talked about black people, you can't start shooting each other and blaming white people. Like, you have to stop this. And basically, he was saying something that I wish someone had said to the Crips and Bloods 30 years ago. And I would really admire the article that the guy wrote, because he was like, don't do this. Don't go down this road. He was like, look at the United States. Look what's happened. Stop this right now. Because, here in Canada, you don't have the same gun culture and the same number of street murders and shootings and all of that. It's just not as violent a country as the United States is.
Yeah. I mean, I just can't relate, but
yeah.
But so
and
it happened to you.
I don't hold it against someone who can't relate. I think the point isn't to be able to relate. The point is to accept the fact that it's real.
That it happens, yeah.
I had that happen this year, and this podcast has turned way too heavy for a comedy podcast, by the way. But I had that happen earlier this year. We had one of our many school shootings, because it's a hobby we have in the States, was at University of Santa Barbara. And the guy hated women. And he was like, the women won't date me, the women won't have sex with me, so I'm going to kill them all and blah, blah, blah. Well, an offshoot of that was a hashtag on Twitter called Yes All Women.
Right.
And it was women sharing their experiences of violence and sexual assault and so on. And I had talked right before that, a few weeks before that, I had been talking to a woman friend, and she was talking to me about violent men. She had been a victim of, a man hitting her and so on. And she was telling me how widespread it was, and I didn't know. And then I started reading that Yes All Women hashtag, and it was like, yeah, this is real. Women deal with this every day. Just like I said about the white cop pointing a gun at me, women deal with some form of sexual harassment or threat every day of their lives. And it's just normal to them, and we don't even think about it. And there were some of the things that hit me. Like, one that hit me was this woman said, yes, all women, because you don't have to plan days in advance how to get home safely after dark. And it's like, that's true. If you're a man, you don't even think about it.
Don't even think about it.
You don't. And women, it's like women have to think, where am I going to be? How am I going to get back? What am I going to wear? Another great one was yes, all women, because rather than teach us how to dress, why not teach men not to rape? And it's like, yeah, that's true, because even today, if a woman gets raped, the first thought is, well, what was she wearing? Which is horrible.
Yeah.
Right.
I know, because, I would, whether it be a wife or a sister or girlfriend, they might talk about, I don't want to walk, it's 9 o'clock at night. And we're just thinking, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Like, I walk this way all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just on edge.
Yeah.
Looking around,
looking
over their shoulders.
With good reason. Yeah. They're not on edge because it's not like they're scared because something's not going to happen,
Well, I mean, it could be perception.
No,
I mean, if it has never happened to them in the past, but they just hear about it, then they go, I got to be on guard.
But it's perception based on reality.
Yeah.
It's like you look at college girls. It's like it's not like rape doesn't happen on campus. Mm-hmm. So it's not that they're not scared to go home just because of some boogeyman that they thought of. It's like, no, this really has happened to someone they know, if not them, almost definitely someone they know. So.
Mm-hmm. Also, you talked on one of your episodes about comedy's had it rough in the last couple months with Robin Williams and then Joan Rivers. Talked about Robin Williams, and then there's this perception out there that a lot of comedians are, it's the sad clown, laughing on the outside, sad on the inside.
That's not perception. That's very real. Joan Rivers was a different case. Joan Rivers was 81 years old, and she, was sick, and she passed away. But when you look at Robin Williams, John Panette, who was drug related and drug and weight related and so on. And comics all have a dark side. It might be sadness, it might be depression, it might be anger. But what I said, my point was, when everyone started talking about it, we wouldn't give it up because you'd lose the funny. That's the thing. Nobody would make that choice. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm not anti-therapy. I'm not anti-help. But what I'm saying is that while it's a shame that in that moment when Robin decided to kill himself, there was nobody there to stop him. There was nobody there to remind him of maybe his kids or his family or whatever it was when he was in that moment that he was so depressed and felt so alone that he killed himself. But I don't think Robin would have given up the depressive side if he'd had to give up the funny, And it was interesting. After he died, NPR played an interview that he had done, I think in like 06 or 08. And in the interview, he joked about suicide. And the joke, it was I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, imagine you call suicide hotline and they're like, well, life isn't for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. It was actually a funny joke, so it's there.
But, the thing is, I guess, like, if you have that choice and that's the way it's going to go, either I'm going to stay depressed and be funny or get better and not be funny, then yes, you might make that choice consciously, but you don't know that. You could still get help and you might still be funny or be different kind of funny.
Yeah, it might. And I'm not anti-therapy. I'm not saying don't get help. I've been through demons in my life that I've had help fighting, but the idea of, what bothered me was after Robin Williams died, everyone started talking about it and making it about them. And this isn't about me. It's not about you. This was about Robin. This was about Robin Williams, the shame of him dying, the pain to his family. That's what was important. Not you, not the fact, not you standing up and saying, well, I'm depressed too. No, it's not about you.
Yeah.
If you're depressed too, go get help. But that's what bothered me when everyone took this story to make it about themselves.
Yeah. People do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's our job to call them out on it.
Yeah. And now he also had addiction issues. We don't know if that was part of it.
It was absolutely part of it. I've been a sober addict for 26 years.
26 years. Yeah. Now it's not something that you talk about a lot.
No, I don't talk about it, but it's true. Well, I always say that I went to recovery. My timing was bad because I got sober before I became a comic. Mm-hmm. The ideal timing would have been to walk out of Last Comic Standing and into celebrity rehab. That would have been a career move.
Yeah.
I blew it. But, it definitely had to do with it. Philip Seymour Hoffman, right? Yeah. If you're in the recovery community, which I am, it's actually quite common when people have long-term sobriety, long-term meaning 10 or 20 years sobriety, and they go back to drinking and using, they die. It's very common. Mm-hmm. For one thing, your body's not used to it.
And they're going back in the way they used to do it.
Yeah, because the mind still wants it. So when you have a case like Philip Seymour Hoffman, his heroin craving was as if he had never stopped using heroin, but his body certainly wasn't up to the amount of heroin that he used to use. When you talk about Robin, somebody who had been sober a long time and then started drinking, and I don't know what he did. I don't know if he did pills or what. I don't know, so I'm not saying, but I know he was no longer sober. There's a lot of depression and feeling of failure and feeling of throwing away umpteen years of sobriety. Like those feelings compound it. You know what I mean? That only makes it worse. It's like people with weight problems. Mm-hmm. With huge weight problems, the people who have lost 200 pounds and gained it back. Now it's not just you're hundreds of pounds overweight. The feeling of failure, the feeling of I did it again is tremendous.
I'm worthless. Mm-hmm. Can't do it. What was your addiction?
Cocaine and alcohol. But the substance doesn't matter. If you're an addict, you're just an addict. The substance is just whatever's around, or you have different types of highs. But it's like if you're a cocaine addict and there's no cocaine around, you'll drink. If there's no alcohol around, you'll take pills. Now,
when you get rid of those harmful substances, as you have for the last 26 years, do you replace it with less harmful ones like chocolate or
that's
something
part
else?
Of it. Sometimes you do that. People switch addictions, but you have to deal with what's behind the addiction, the emotional and mental stuff behind it. But yeah, there are definitely switches. People go from one to another.
And you got to be strong because you're working in nightclubs where they're serving alcohol all the time.
See, that's the paradox. It's not strength. It's total surrender. It's the fact that I can't do it. So, it's like the diabetic and sugar. It's not you're not strong to say you don't eat sugar. You're like, well, I can't have sugar. You just know you can't. So you don't. You know what I mean? You just don't. And the other thing is, I've been as high as you want to be. I've been as loaded as you want to be. So there's no allure, because it's not like I haven't done this. You know what I mean? I've probably been higher than you. So I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Cross it off your list. And now you're on to other things, funnier things. You got a CD you were selling last night.
Yeah, my last CD was called "He Had Me at Black," and I recorded it right after the 2012 election of Barack Obama, and I went through my favorite thing on the CD is breaking down all the Republican candidates and how it was literally a reality show, just one crazy ass Republican after another, from Michelle Bachmann to Rick Perry to
Hey,
on and on.
but Herman Cain didn't have you at black.
No, but Herman Cain. See, Herman Cain and Michael Steele.
I don't know him.
Michael Steele was the head of the Republican Party, and this is the difference between them and Condoleezza Rice. See, I respected Condoleezza Rice's intelligence.
Right, you just didn't understand her.
Right. Herman Cain was just a clown. He was a clown, and they put him up there to be a clown, and it's because what they need. They say we need a black person to say racist things about Barack Obama that we're not allowed to say. So that's what they use Herman Cain for. That's what they use Michael Steele for. And that's what I mean about Condoleezza Rice wasn't that. That's why, no white Republican was going to vote for Herman Cain. They just loved having a black person say things about Barack Obama that they are not allowed to say in public. I've been approached by Fox News and other things to be a right-wing black comedian. You know how badly they're looking for that? That would be $1 million, like, instantly,
So they reach out.
Yeah.
Because you're political and
Absolutely.
you will criticize the left if you see fit.
Yeah.
So now if we see somebody on, do we get Fox News here? I guess we do. I don't see it. But if there's a black comic Fox News guy, we can know that he's just sort of, he needs a sellout.
Maybe not. Maybe not. I'm sure there's some who there must be some, I don't know, maybe, that truly believes all that stuff. Yeah. I don't know. I've heard people say I'm a black Republican, but
really,
yeah, and there are black Republicans. The only time I'll buy it is from a financial point of view, meaning I own a business and I don't want to pay taxes. But when it comes to social issues and the inherent racism in the party, it's like, well, you can't support that. And they endorse racism with a wink and a nod because it appeals to their base. Mm-hmm. You look at the Tea Party and they're like, oh, it has nothing to do with race. Really? Because the day after the black man got elected, you started yelling, give us our country back. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that has nothing to do with race. Really?
You think Dennis Miller is a niche comic? Like he saw it as a opportunity. Like there's nobody. I'm going to fill this void. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be the guy speaking against the others, against the left.
Yeah, he did.
So I wonder how much of it he truly believes, or if he just wants to be
but
that guy.
If you look at young Dennis Miller, if you look at Weekend Update Dennis Miller, he couldn't have been more liberal.
Yeah,
he could not have been more liberal. I mean, for Clinton. Like Clinton wasn't liberal enough for him. Now he claims 9/11 was the moment he switched. I don't know. And believe me, it makes if Dennis Miller just walked up and said, I'm a conservative, you'd be like, well, you're a rich white male.
Makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But to have been so liberal and so funny on the liberal side to suddenly switch, that's the part that, I don't buy. It doesn't ring true to me, but I don't know him, so who knows?
I mean, he is socially, he's pro-choice, and, maybe that's the only thing. But, he is liberal on some issues, but then he just chooses to be identify with the Republicans.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know, again, I don't know him, so I can't say how he made that switch.
Yeah. But I'm glad you didn't.
No, I couldn't.
Because you just got to be yourself.
Yeah, and that's the money's not worth it.
Because you got to live with yourself.
You got to live with your friends. You got to live with your family. You have to remember, I'm at an age. My parents were in the civil rights movement. My parents grew up with segregation.
Right.
See, so I can't look.
Where
my
were they
mother in
down
the
south?
eye. My mother's from South Carolina, but she moved up to New York, and I thank God for that. My father's actually from Honduras. So when I talk about immigration, when I'm on stage, it's like I'm not talking. I know what I'm talking about. My dad was an immigrant who became a U.S. citizen. So I have both of those. I have both of those in my pocket.
Hey, we got to wrap this up. It's been heavy, but I want to ask, did you watch the last season of Last Comic Standing?
I watched parts of it. I didn't watch the whole thing.
Yeah, it was different. There was no house like when you were there.
They definitely changed the format. I'm really happy for Rodman.
Yeah,
I
he's a
thought
funny
he was going
guy.
to win. I thought, after a few episodes, I thought he was going to win. He's been grinding a long time. He's super funny, so he absolutely deserves it.
But he beat out our Vancouver boy, Lachlan.
Lachlan's a funny guy, too. But Lachlan will be all right. Trust me.
Yeah.
Lachlan's going to do well. You had great old veteran comics on there. Rocky Laporte's an old friend of mine.
He's hilarious.
Rock's hilarious. Jimmy Schubert.
Yeah.
And it's always good for comedy. That show is good for comedy because it brings people's awareness back.
Yeah.
But I still think that we were the best there ever was, season 2 and 3.
When you were the winner.
Well, yeah, but the season with me and Heffron and Kathleen and Tammy and Gary and Todd
good.
Glass, and top to bottom, we were the best.
Except for
Corey
Ant.
Holcomb.
Except for Ant.
Ant's a personality. He wasn't a comic. He was a personality.
And then you were a judge. Now
Yeah.
Now we had Roseanne and Russell Peters and Marlon Wayans.
No, Keenan Ivory Wayans.
What? No.
Yeah.
Was it?
It was Keenan. Yeah. It wasn't Marlon. Marlon's doing his own show on TBS. No, it's Keenan.
Okay. And yeah, he's doing another sort of comedy competition
Yeah, he was
show.
doing like a
That's kind of
funny. His was closer to Funny or Die, I think. I thought the judges were all right. I wasn't crazy about Roseanne. I think Roseanne's a little out of touch.
Yeah.
Russell was great, and Keenan. I don't know where he was coming from with that. When I was a judge, this will be my Canadian thing. We picked Deborah DiGiovanni,
Hey.
and we picked. Why am I blanking on his name? The
Jerry
teacher,
D.
Jerry D. So we did pretty good on picking Canadian comics.
We appreciate that, Alonzo.
Well, it's not appreciated. It's that we recognize, like, wow, these two are good.
Right. Yeah. It's got to be hard to judge.
It's very hard to do. Very hard to do.
Yeah.
But they stood out.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking time to come in on such a nice day and talk.
Yeah, it's cool.
Your day off.
Cool.
Yeah.
It was a good show. Sorry to your listeners if it got too heavy, but that's the other side of comedy.
Exactly. It's about issues. It's about ideas.
Yes, it is.
Comedy's about ideas.
It is.
And you got them.
That's right. And it's my idea not to listen to Miley Cyrus.
All right, Alonzo, thanks a lot. Bye-bye. And so ends my conversation with Alonzo Bodden. Hope you enjoyed it. Please know that all the talk about basketball and jazz was edited from its original length. So you didn't get the full extent of what we talked about, but I think you'll thank me for that. He had lots more to talk about, and I appreciate him coming in on such a beautiful day. So that's the show. Thanks for listening. Next week, we've got another American from Seattle. Peter Gray will be our guest. Good night.